My name is Cassandra Wilson, but everyone calls me Cassie. I am 34 years old, and last Tuesday, my entire life changed when I checked my lottery ticket and discovered I had won $47 million. My hands shook as I stared at those six numbers that matched perfectly. After the initial shock wore off, a strange thought crossed my mind. I would tell absolutely no one about this money. You see, I have a complicated history with my family when it comes to finances. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. Before that fateful Tuesday, my life was painfully ordinary. I worked as an accountant at a small marketing firm in Portland, making just enough to live somewhat comfortably, but never enough to feel secure. My apartment was a modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every morning, I would wake up at 6, make my coffee, and start my day with the persistent worry of bills and deadlines hanging over my head. The job was demanding, with 60-hour work weeks becoming the norm rather than the exception, especially during tax season. My family's situation was complicated to say the least. My parents, Gregory and Diane Wilson, divorced when I was 14 and both remarried within 2 years. My father, Gregory, a high school physics teacher, married Stephanie, a real estate agent with expensive taste and an even more expensive lifestyle. My mother, Diane, found love with Warren, a successful business owner who had more money than my father, but kept a tight grip on every penny. I have 2 siblings. My younger sister, Lisa, is 30 and has always been the golden child. She graduated from an Ivy League university, married a surgeon named Paul, and now lives in a beautiful house in the suburbs with their 2 perfect children. Then there is my older brother, Jason, 36, who, despite his charm and intelligence, has never quite figured out his life. He bounces from job to job, relationship to relationship, and has made borrowing money from family members something of an art form. The pattern was always the same: desperate call, emotional plea, promise to pay it back, then radio silence until the next crisis. Extended family was no less complicated. My Aunt Martha, my mother's younger sister, was perhaps the only genuine person in our family circle. Despite living paycheck to paycheck as an elementary school teacher, she always found ways to show up when it mattered. She drove an ancient Honda that made alarming noises, lived in a small apartment filled with books and plants, and never complained about her circumstances. In stark contrast was my Aunt Heather, my father's older sister, who had married wealthy and never let anyone forget it. She spent holidays critiquing everyone's life choices and making backhanded comments about my career, apartment, and perpetually single status. My cousin Ryan, her son, had inherited her entitlement, but none of her financial success, and had a gambling problem that the family pretended not to notice. My history with financial assistance in the family had left me jaded. When Jason needed $5,000 for rehab 3 years ago, I emptied my modest savings account to help him, only to discover months later that he had never actually gone to treatment. When Lisa needed help with her weighing costs, I put $2,000 on my credit card that she promised to pay back after the honeymoon. 5 years later, I was still waiting. When my father needed a loan to repair his roof after a storm, I sent what I could only to see photos of him and Stephanie vacationing in Cancun the following month. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend Charlotte. We had met in college, and unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained constant. Charlotte worked as a nurse, understood struggle, and never judged my complicated feelings about my family. She was the voice of reason when I felt myself becoming bitter, reminding me that not everyone was out to take advantage of me. At work, things were not much better. My boss, Arnold, had a habit of taking credit for my ideas during meetings with clients. My colleague Derek consistently left early, leaving me to pick up his slack, yet somehow always managed to get the recognition I deserved. Despite being underappreciated, I kept my head down and continued to work diligently, hoping someday it would pay off. Buying lottery tickets was my one small indulgence, a weekly ritual that my family loved to tease me about. Every Friday, I would stop at the corner store and spend $10 on tickets. My mother called it a tax on people who could not do math. My brother joked that I should just give him the money directly instead of wasting it. My father lectured me about probability and statistics. But there was something hopeful about those tickets, a tiny chance of freedom that I could not bring myself to give up, even as years passed without winning more than $20 here and there. I had dreams, of course. I wanted to travel to see places beyond the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to go back to school, maybe get a master's degree in something I was actually passionate about. I wanted to have enough savings that an unexpected car repair would not send me into a financial tailspin. But these dreams seemed increasingly distant as I approached my mid-30s, still paying off student loans and carrying a small but persistent credit card debt that never seemed to diminish despite my careful budgeting. Each month was a careful balancing act of bills, groceries, and the occasional dinner out with Charlotte. I clipped coupons, compared prices, and knew exactly which store had the best deal on everything from toilet paper to coffee. I drove a 10-year-old Corolla that made a concerning noise when it rained, but could not afford to replace it. I had mastered the art of appearing perfectly fine while constantly calculating costs in my head, wondering if I could afford to say yes to an invitation or if I needed to invent an excuse to stay home. This was my life before everything changed. Ordinary, sometimes difficult, occasionally lonely, but stable in its own way. I had no idea how a single piece of paper was about to completely upend everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called family. The day I bought the winning ticket was actually my 34th birthday. I had just finished a particularly grueling week at work where Arnold had once again taken credit for my financial strategy that saved a major client thousands of dollars. I stopped at Gus's Corner Market as I did every Friday, but this time with a slight variation in my routine. "Happy birthday," Cassie, Gus called out as I entered. Gus was a kind older man who had owned the store for over 30 years. He knew all his regular customers by name and always had a friendly word to share. "Thanks, Gus. The usual, please, and maybe one extra for good luck," I replied, handing him $20 instead of my typical 10. "Birthday splurge, huh? Maybe today is your lucky day," he said with a wink as he handed me my tickets. Instead of my usual quick pick, I decided on a whim to choose my own numbers. I selected my birth month and day 3 and 16, my mother's birthday 12, my father's birthday 21, Martha's birthday 9, and Charlotte's birthday 30. 6 numbers that represented the most important people in my life, even those who had disappointed me. That evening, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened a bottle of wine Charlotte had given me as a birthday gift, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The lottery drawing was at 8:00 p.m., but I barely paid attention as I scrolled through social media, seeing posts from acquaintances enjoying far more exciting birthday celebrations than mine. At 8:30, I remembered the tickets and lazily picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as usual. The first number matched 3. I smiled slightly. The second matched 16. My heart rate picked up just a bit. Third number 12, fourth 21. By now my palms were sweating. Fifth number 9. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final number 30. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity. This could not be right. I must have read something wrong. I checked again and again. I turned on the television and rewound to the live drawing. I watched as each of my numbers appeared on the screen one after another. My hands shook so badly I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered to the empty apartment. "No way." According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of $47 million. After taxes, it would be somewhere around $28 million, an unfathomable sum for someone who had been excited earlier that day about a 10% off coupon for laundry detergent. I did not sleep at all that night. Instead, I spent hours researching lottery winners online. What I found was disturbing stories of winners whose lives fell apart after their windfall, families torn apart by greed, friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere with soba stories and outstretched hands, winners who were bankrupt within 5 years more miserable than before they had won. One article called the lottery the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun rose, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Charlotte. At least not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to understand what this money would mean for my life before everyone else tried to tell me what to do with it. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and made an appointment with Philip Montgomery, an attorney specializing in financial planning and estate law. His office was in a downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the waiting room in my ordinary clothes, clutching my purse with the winning ticket inside, I felt like an imposter. Miss Wilson. Philip greeted me, extending his hand. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone finding out this time." His eyes widened briefly as he examined the ticket. Then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you have come to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, Philip explained my options. In our state, lottery winners could claim prizes through trusts or legal entities that would keep their identities private. He outlined the process of setting up a blind trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to help manage such a large sum. "The biggest mistake winners make," he told me, "is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there is no going back." I nodded, relieved that my instinct had been correct. "I want to do this right. I do not want this money to ruin my life." As I left Philip's office with a folder full of documents and a list of next steps, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I had more money than I had ever dreamed of. Yet, I could not share this life-changing news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same struggling accountant while secretly being a multi-millionaire. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Philip to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I would never have to worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was real now, sitting in accounts under my control. Yet, my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work, still complained about bills with co-workers, still drove my old Corolla. The secrecy was starting to weigh on me. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries? Or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions haunted me, and gradually an idea began to form. What if there was a way to find out how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who to share my secret with? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be part of my new life. The next day, I met with Philip again to ensure my finances were properly secured before proceeding with my plan. We had established a diverse investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but me. "Everything is in order," Cassandra. Philip assured me, sliding a folder across his polished desk. "Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to." The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions. I was not ready to answer. "I think I will stay at my job for now," I replied. "At least until I figure some things out." That evening, I invited Charlotte over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I could not keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone. "I am thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family." I began carefully. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "What kind of experiment?" I took a deep breath. "I am going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it." Charlotte's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Cassie, that seems manipulative." "Why would you do that?" "Because I am tired of being the only one who helps when others need it," I said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned." but lying to test people, that does not sound like you. Charlotte set down her wine glass. Why not just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation. I laughed without humor. Right, because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Charlotte. You have seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove? I am not trying to prove anything. I insisted, though that was not entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource. Charlotte shook her head. I think you are going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this. But I know that look in your eye, you have already made up your mind. She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story, making sure it was believable, but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm I worked for had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients. I would say I needed $5,000 to cover rent and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family members. I made a list of everyone I would approach. My mother Diane and stepfather Warren, my father Gregory and stepmother Stephanie, my sister Lisa and her husband Paul, my brother Jason, my Aunt Martha, my Aunt Heather, and my cousin Ryan. 10 people, all of whom had turned to me for help at some point, all of whom I had supported either financially or emotionally when they needed it. The next day, I practiced my story with Charlotte, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her misgivings. You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate, she advised. And have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions. I nodded, taking notes. I will say the CEO had been embezzling funds and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck. And what about your job search? They will ask about that. I have been applying everywhere, but the job market is tight, especially for specialized accounting positions. I have some interviews lined up, but nothing definite yet, and my emergency fund is depleted from some recent medical tests. I had thought through every detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many questions. As I finalized my plan, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was Charlotte right? Was this manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost, and my resolve strengthened. This was not just about testing them. It was about protecting myself and my future. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. My mother would probably offer some help, but less than I needed. My father would lecture me about financial responsibility, but might send a small amount. Lisa would claim she could not help due to the kids' expenses. Jason would definitely say he had no money. Warren and Stephanie would refuse outright. Aunt Heather would judge me for my poor life choices. Cousin Ryan would promise help that would never materialize. The only person I had real hope for was Aunt Martha. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most generous with what she had. But even with her, I tried to keep my expectations low. $5,000 was a lot of money for a public school teacher living alone. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member individually, tell them the same story, and see who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me beyond what I could do for them. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to find out who my real family was. I decided to call my mother first. Diane had always prided herself on being a nurturing parent, frequently reminding us how she had sacrificed her own dreams to raise her children. If anyone would help, I thought it would be her. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said intentionally, making my voice sound strained. "Cassie, is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my prepared story, telling her about the company suddenly closing, the lost wages, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, growing more concerned with each detail. "Oh, honey, that is terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks to process and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent medical tests for some concerning symptoms. I did not specify what the symptoms were, allowing her imagination to fill in the blanks. I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I can find something new. I promise I will pay you back as soon as I can. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Cassie, Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We are pretty cash poor right now. Her voice took on a slightly defensive tone. Have you asked your father or Lisa? Paul makes good money at the hospital. I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said truthfully, and Lisa has the kids and their private school tuition. Well, let me talk to Warren and see what we can do, she said finally. But I cannot promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, I did know. Warren had never considered me his responsibility, making it clear from the beginning that his money was for my mother and any children they might have had together. They never did. Sure, Mom. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent is due next week. I will, honey, and I am so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable. After hanging up, I noted her response in a journal I had started for this purpose. She had expressed concern, but immediately looked for ways to pass the responsibility to someone else. She had not outright refused, but I suspected her conversation with Warren would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day, I met my father, Gregory, for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. You look tired, was his greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain details. When I finished by asking for help with the $5,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Cassandra, I have always taught you about financial responsibility. He began slipping into his teacher voice. This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan? Life happened, Dad. I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money. He sighed heavily. And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services? For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. I would love to help you, Cassie, but Stephanie and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We cannot afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible. He patted my hand patronizingly. This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes. I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Lisa was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband Paul was golfing, giving us privacy to talk. Cassie, what a surprise, she exclaimed when she opened the door. The kids are at their swimming lessons. Come in. Her house was immaculate with expensive furniture and framed professional family photos on every wall. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my situation. Oh my God, that is awful, she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. I cannot believe they would just close like that. Poor you. Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. Oh, she said, her expression shifting slightly. Well, this is actually not a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month, and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we are redoing the master bathroom. She glanced around nervously. Paul handles most of our finances, and he is really strict about our budget. I understand, I said quietly. I would not ask if I was not desperate. I know, she said quickly. Let me talk to Paul and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount, or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room is being used for storage right now, but we could clear it out. I thanked her for the offer, but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search centered in the city. She promised to call me after speaking with Paul, but the way she avoided eye contact told me all I needed to know. My brother Jason was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message. "That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. Will call you later." He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered, and when I tried calling him directly, the calls went straight to voicemail. This from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. My stepmother Stephanie was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pretense of sympathy. "Cassandra, I am sure this is difficult, but Warren and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate?" When I pointed out that I had helped them with repairs to their vacation cabin last year, she bristled. "That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using." The fact that I had only been invited to the cabin once in 5 years apparently did not matter. My stepfather Warren was even worse. "You are not my daughter," he said plainly when I called. "I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path." My cousin Ryan initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check, but when the day came, he texted an hour before saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did and eventually stopped responding to my messages altogether. Aunt Heather's response was perhaps the least surprising but still painful. "Well, Cassandra, I always said that company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college, but no one listens to me." She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had heard from Lisa that Aunt Heather was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family, but the reality was still painful to accept. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years could not or would not return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Martha. "Cassie, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I had not actually reached out to Martha yet, planning to call her the next day. The fact that she had called me first after hearing about my situation secondhand spoke volumes. "I am hanging in there," I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. "Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Martha looked exactly as she always did, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. "I am so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway." As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the table. "It is $3,000. I know it is not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least." I stared at the envelope in shock. "Martha, I cannot take this. This is too much nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else." She reached across the table and took my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It is not fancy, but you are welcome to stay as long as you need to." Tears filled my eyes, and this time they were completely genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. "Now, do not you worry about paying this back right away," she continued. "Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that does not appreciate you." As we left the diner, Martha hugged me again. "You are going to be okay, Cassie. You are smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road." Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $3,000 more money than I knew Martha could comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and the rest of my family's could not have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Martha, I did some research that left me stunned. $3,000 represented nearly all of her savings, and I discovered that she had been quietly dealing with complications from type 2 diabetes. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she had been picking up extra tutoring work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Martha, who had so little, had given me almost everything she had without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $8,000 on a bathroom renovation, could not spare $5,000 to help her daughter with rent and medical bills. The next day, I invited Martha to my apartment for dinner. As she settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. "Martha, I need to tell you something." I began setting a cup of tea in front of her. "I have not been completely honest with you." Her expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. "What is it, honey?" "I did not lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position." The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it. Martha was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Are you angry with me?" I asked suddenly, afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. "No, not angry. Sad, maybe sad that you felt you needed to test people this way." She took a sip of her tea. "But I understand why you did it. Our family has not always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help," I told her. "Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely." Martha sighed. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself." "What do you mean?" She set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. "My ex-husband, Robert. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced?" I shook my head. The family story had always been vague. Something about growing apart. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died. About $50,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Robert immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures. She smiled ruefully. "I wanted to save it for our future. Maybe buy a small house eventually. We fought about it for months." What happened? One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. She shook her head at the memory when I confronted him. Do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story, less messy. She reached for my hand. "The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and it is a painful lesson." "I am so sorry that happened to you," I said, squeezing her hand. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships." She looked at me intently. "Money does not just reveal who others truly are, Cassie. It reveals who we are too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It is a powerful mirror." Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. "Martha, there is something else I need to tell you. Something big." I took a deep breath. "I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. "I have not told anyone else. Not my parents, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte. You are the first to know." "Oh, Cassie," she breathed. That is life-changing." "I know. And that is why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money." Martha nodded slowly. "I understand that. But what will you do now?" "That is what I am trying to figure out. The money is secure and I have good financial advisors. But I do not know how to handle the family." Martha considered this. "You know you do not owe anyone anything, Cassie. Not even me. But I want to help you." I insisted. "Your medical expense is a better apartment. Whatever you need." She smiled gently. "I do not need anything from you, sweetheart. I am happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it is full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books, and now this wonderful secret with my favorite niece." She patted my hand. Just knowing you are secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Martha and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard you asked Lisa for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you are playing us against each other. Another came from my father. Stephanie tells me you have been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to show compassion, and in doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Martha, I met with Philip to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Martha, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She is very proud. Philip nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She would not have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not as to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Martha's situation and the many others like her. What about the rest of your family? Philip asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now. Maybe not ever, but I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Charlotte and finally told her the truth about everything, the lottery win, and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I am not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something to do good, starting with Martha. She deserves it, Charlotte agreed. And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test? I am still figuring that out. I have called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mother and Warren, my father, and Stephanie, Lisa, and Paul, even Jason, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Heather arrived with a disapproving frown already in place. Aunt Martha came last, giving me a secret smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Jason suddenly became very interested in his phone. Lisa and Paul exchanged glances. The truth is I am fine. I have found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. I will be transitioning to that position next month. Well, that is wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief. We have all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So why all the drama about needing money? My father asked, his tone accusatory. Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up? I met his gaze steadily. The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That is what family is supposed to be for, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Stephanie said defensively. It is not always possible to help even when we want to. Of course, I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Jason. Speaking of which, Jason, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet, you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas for your rent. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I was going through some stuff and I did not have any money to give you. You did not even call me back. I pointed out that would have been free. The meeting continued in this vein with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had not told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself: the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Martha stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. You did well, she said quietly. That could not have been easy. It was actually easier than I expected, I replied. For the first time, I was not afraid of disappointing them because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Martha smiled. That is a powerful realization. So, what happens next? Next, I said, we start looking at houses for both of us. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was Martha's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the days her diabetes made walking difficult. My nonprofit organization's second family had grown beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was rewarding in a way my accounting career had never been, and we had already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Charlotte had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise and compassionate nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything I needed to know about their interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Jason called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Lisa complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time I remembered the silence when I had needed help and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Ryan finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Martha and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. She had retired from teaching but volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, still sharing her love of books with children who needed it. "You know what still amazes me?" she said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away." I nodded. Considering this alternate reality, the family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. "And you would never have known what was real," Martha added. "That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom." She was right. The experiment had been painful but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who did not. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others, constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I had allowed myself to be us because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind Martha had shown me, did not keep a balance sheet. It gave freely without expectation of return, but it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them, instead stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Martha and Charlotte, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone. But so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. Martha reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. "You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned." I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the shock of those matching numbers to the pain of rejection to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening, and may you find the clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.